Do you think there's a feeling that there's a lot of talk that we're not in a recession, we're in a depression? So you don't think, you think that when the economy is turned back on again, your sentiment and the market sentiment is that that V-shaped recovery will happen as opposed to the slough of despair?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to label this one though, isn't it? Because as I said, it is self-imposed.
Yeah, it's kind of
Normal
weird.
recessions are triggered by our change in the credit cycle. And that was not the case here. The trigger was a lockdown, which reduced economic activity. So since that was self-imposed and can be reversed, I suspect it's going to bounce back. And we're seeing some of that, of course, with China, right? I also believe this, I don't know if this is consensus or not, actually, I'm not sure, but I don't believe what they call, a second wave, which would trigger a second lockdown, is going to be practical or possible to do in the United States. I think the prevailing view now seems to be much ado about nothing. This was like, we forgive the powers that be for initially reacting with such unprecedented measures, like literally almost martial law, right? You are like, you can't go to work, you can't have contact with other human beings.
Yeah.
But we are seeing increasingly, actually out of Europe, University of Oxford's doing a lot of great research, we're seeing increasingly that, all right, our initial assumptions of the lethality of this and its infectious nature is not nearly as bad as we thought. And so people are like, oh, the boy who cried wolf a little, right? So,
well, I suppose too, as well, there are things you probably needed the shock, and obviously it was done to protect the healthcare workers,
yep.
so the hospitals weren't, the surge. But also, when you're told now, keep your distance, wear your mask, all this stuff, it's, unless you had a big shock, you might say, I'm not going to do that. I think you needed to have this big shock to go, okay, this is serious, and how we handle it going forward. And
I tend to have great faith in humans, right? I think most human beings are really good at understanding their situation. I mean, most people get through life, so that says something about their ability to think through what's in front of them. And what if I could do it over? I think the massive shutdown was, based on the information we had, seemed a very reasonable thing. However, the moral hazard that we've introduced here is because, as we've been seeing evidence that this really isn't as bad as we thought, the average age of somebody dying in the US, I believe, is older than the average life expectancy of an American, right? So it's very old people for the most part. So I think we could have prevented this moral hazard that will happen in the future, where people go, oh, another one of those, I'm not going to believe it. We could have prevented it if we had quickly recalibrated and said, okay, it looks like it's not as bad as we thought, let's get back to work. So I think it's not good, because the next time something happens, maybe that will be the really bad, deadly one with the millions of people dying. And, when it comes to public policy, people remember certain things and oh, it wasn't a problem last time, right? I gave this analogy the other day to a group of people. I said, if you're worried about Americans being dull and unresponsive to a real pending threat, I really don't think you have to worry about that. And here's my analogy. Let's say COVID, the effect of COVID was that it was a flesh-eating disease and it ate the skin off your face.
Yeah.
And it was highly, highly contagious, right? I suspect you would not have to worry about people wearing masks and going outside, because people would eat, the grass in their backyard before they went outside. No one would go out, because they would say, well, that kind of risk is too great for me to accept. So I feel people are capable of seeing. Maybe if you were in New York, where there was a lot of problems, a lot of deaths, particularly in nursing homes, your position is, I'm not going back to work until I'm forced. But for the most part, it looks like the worst is behind us. And as we talked about a little earlier, I think we can look at all the bad sides, trillions in debt and people unemployed, which is awful. On the other hand, lots of new behaviors have been adopted, which is going to have positive effects going forward.
Well, hugely, because we talked about the ability to work at home, rethinking schedules. Apparently the 5-day week was brought in because after World War II, there wasn't enough jobs. So it went from a 6-day week to a 5-day week, which kind of makes sense. So now maybe we might go towards that 4-day week, or we have different weekends and we roster our time, and it's we don't have to do that 9 to 5 stuff or the Monday through Friday. And I know entrepreneurs work day and night and all the rest of it, but the vast populace can, and that has huge implications for commuting, housing, where people live, where their hubs are. So you can actually change the world a bit for the better.
It's remarkable how little the percentage reduction in traffic, automobile traffic, has to occur for the smooth operations of the roadway. It's 2-3% reduction, because you get these tipping points where you get just enough additional traffic where you become jammed, right? And suddenly the roads are moving at 10 miles an hour. So having some percent, and of course it's city planners, automobile manufacturers, even restaurants, everybody's wondering how much of this change in behavior is going to stick. If 5% of the U.S. workforce stayed employed, but from this point on did not go into an office, it would have huge implications.
And positive, I'm sure, for many people. I mean, I work from home mostly, and I miss office environments, but only for the chit chat, only for like the networking, and maybe the odd thing that where you might, but it's mostly, I do much more work at my desk when I'm not surrounded by people and water coolers and coffee breaks and all the rest of it. It's interesting.
Yeah. I think that part is for sure going to happen. And, Silicon Valley, which has, for the most part, you had to be in Silicon Valley, right?
Yes.
You probably saw different companies, including, Facebook, saying, hey, in 5 to 10 years, maybe half the workforce will be working remote. That has big implications.
And nice ones. I mean, that whole commute is horrible. Yeah.
It is hard to think of a negative to expanding the set of choices for the workers.
Yeah.
Though I will say, I am not one of the work from home people, right? I just can't do it. And I would be concerned about having workers who get up, they work from their home office, they get done, they kind of do something in their house, they get up, do the same thing. It seems a little monotonous. So I suspect there's got to be some changes there.
Well, maybe it could be even like, a 2-day at home out of 5 days and 3 days in the office, and then you don't go in till 12, so you're missing all the traffic, or you come home at 8, or you vary stuff around. Anyway, there's lots. People are now thinking outside the box. I want to move now on to cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Yay! And I know 2012 you first got involved with crypto. You're co-founder of Tether, but it's the Opskins that I want to talk about. That's when we first spoke about that, and Wax. So the big interesting thing is that with Opskins and then Wax, you went from the Ethereum to the EOS. That's when we spoke 2 years ago. We spoke about all the gamers and, the fact that obviously it was decentralized. They could actually own, with the Wax, so you could actually own your skin, whatever you had, your digital asset. And if a company went bust, you still owned it. But your company, Wax, did this launch of collectibles, the Garbage Pail Kids, recently. Now, are you a collectible man? Do you collect cards?
Don't.
No. Okay. So I'm good, because I'm trying to kind of fathom this. I'm kind of going, okay, this is a hard thing to understand. I mean, it doesn't come naturally to me. But I mean, these collectibles are huge. The Garbage Pail Kids are massive. And with blockchain technology, Wax was able to put together non-fungible tokens. So it's a digital representation of the card, and it's unique. Yes. And the 28 hours 101,000 cards were sold. Were you floored by that?
I was. It was 110,000 cards sold in 28 hours. I was, because we didn't heavily market it. And while Garbage Pail Kids is a well-known brand to a certain segment of the population, if you're 10 years, born 10 years before or 10 years after that population set, you've never heard of it. And so I was probably one of those guys 10 years too old, but my younger brother reminded me, I didn't even remember this. He said, I was a huge collector of Garbage Pail Kid trading cards in the 80s. And I said, man, I don't remember any of that. And he still has, sets of these trading cards, much like baseball trading cards, right? And so there were elements of why I wanted to experiment with a brand like Garbage Pail Kids, because there was a group of people who were hardcore traders and collectors, and you need that, right? We could talk lots about why blockchain-based NFTs, non-fungible tokens, haven't really done anything significant. And we probably talked about this when you and I talked a couple of years ago. I didn't think they would, for a whole host of reasons, one of which is there needs to be an active community that already finds something of value. And then the blockchain can facilitate transferability, verification of authenticity, those things. But the blockchain can't make something desirable if it's not desired, right? And so putting Garbage Pail Kid trading cards, taking the imagery of the old cards, putting them on a blockchain, and then offering them up, it was amazing how, I was watching, I think like 10% of them sold out in like 15, 20 minutes. And I was like, wow, who are all these people? And yeah, sure enough, a little over a day, 110,000 cards were sold. Well, that was interesting to me. Now, that was 2 weeks ago. Now there's been an order of magnitude increase in the trading of the cards in the secondary market. And that is where all NFTs prior to this have failed. Flat out failed. I'll give you one little tidbit. We had about 120,000 CryptoKitty NFTs on OpsKins at one point. 120,000. And we sold about $1 worth of CryptoKitties per day.
So no
That's
interest.
not a very good business.
No. Isn't that interesting? Because CryptoKitties, you think, even at the height of the craze, were they just
no interest.
No secondary market.
And guess why? Tying it back to something we talked about, convenience. Trying to trade items using Ethereum as the blockchain, which CryptoKitties was Ethereum based, and then doing it in a wallet called MetaMask, which is the definition of inconvenient, meant no one was going to have interest. And I knew this, right? I'd been doing video game item trading for 20 years. I knew it was dead on arrival. It was an interesting concept, but I knew the secondary market would be irrelevant. And sure enough, it is. You had all these poor guys who started secondary marketplaces to trade CryptoKitties. And I tried to educate a lot of them and say, guys, don't quit your day job for this. It has no chance of taking off. You have to solve two problems. The first is make the transferability really simple, low cost, and fast. Okay, that means can't use Ethereum. Ethereum is not simple to transfer. It's costly because they have this crazy surge pricing model with Ethereum. When the network gets busy, they
more.
just jack up the prices. So what cost you 2-3 cents, a dime, 20 cents to trade could cost you $5. And you don't know when it's going to spike, right? So that's one problem. And then the other problem is the user interface. What are people actually using to connect with that blockchain? In the case of Ethereum, it's something called MetaMask. And people think I criticize MetaMask like gratuitously. I don't. I think it's great. It was a project that some guys did, and it worked. It does as delivered. But man, this is tough, right? It's like going back to the 1980s and trying to use a computer. It was not built for the average person.